All right. By my count, we are a minute away from the official start time. I don't want to get too far ahead because I know that there are always laggards, and I want to make sure that they have a chance to come in. But as you're joining, I would be really interested to know where you're joining from. Maybe you can drop what your interest is. It is 4 o'clock. My watch is telling me, so we can go ahead and get rolling. All right. So thank you for joining me on this webinar today, this live workshop. It's blank checks and not blank stares. What we're going to do is try to keep this fast and loose. People are probably going to be coming in and out, and that's cool. There will be a replay available of this afterwards, so keep it up for about a week so that you can review some of the stuff that we do today. But if you're live, go ahead and drop in the chat. Let me know your name, where you're joining from. That's okay if you're shy. That's all right, no big deal. But just curious about why you're joining, what your interest is. This is interactive. I'm going to start with a little bit of information, and then we're going to have some fun and play some games and really start working on how we can really get away from that blank stare moment that I have no idea what's going on when you're a technical communicator. So see people popping into the chat. That's awesome. So again, your name, where you're joining us from, and I'll go ahead and get started. Oh, Elliot, awesome. Good to see you, man. Great. I'm glad you could make this. So this will be a good follow on for some of that chat that we've been having. So awesome. So what we're going to be talking about today, I'm going to share some basic tips, some overviews for technical communicators, marketing, salespeople, anybody who has to deal with a technical subject matter. But the first thing I want to do is I kind of want to start out with a poll, and I want to ask you, who is driving most of the messaging in your organization today? Right. So I'm curious about what your role is. You can drop that into the chat, but I want to just get a temperature for who is driving the messaging in your sales organization. So you can go ahead and pop in here. All right. So marketing. It looks like we've got votes coming in for marketing. And as more people come into the session, which is cool, I'm just curious. I'm asking. Who is driving most of the messaging? Leadership and marketing. That's awesome. Okay, I'll leave this up for another couple of minutes. This is important because depending on the type of organization you have, you're probably getting your messaging direction from multiple directions, or you may have one of those it's complicated type situations, here we go, where messaging is really coming from all over the place, right? So, and there's really not a centralized place where the messaging is kept. There's no system in place, and marketing is saying one thing, leadership is saying another thing. I'll go ahead and stop this. This is looking good. So sales is not driving a lot of the messaging. That's interesting. I would be curious. Maybe we don't have any salespeople in there, because I would suspect that sales is probably often doing their own thing. That typically tends to happen. So, so what we're going to talk about again is that blank stare moment, right? And a lot of people have probably experienced this, where you are doing you're doing a pitch, you're doing a demo. Everything is right on. You have nailed it. Everything is absolutely correct, and then you're just sort of met with that blank stare, or you're not getting. What's up, Tyler? Good to see you. You're not getting that. You're not getting that feedback. You're not getting that attention. You've put up a great website. The messaging is all there, but it's just not really hitting. And today we're going to talk about why that happens and some things that we can do to prevent and avoid that. So I'm going to pull myself off down here so that we don't have inception. And I'm going to just basically talk about some things about where technical communications tends to go wrong, and some things that we can keep in mind to prevent that. So the first thing, typically, I find when I'm working with technical communicators is they go too deep too quickly, right? So as practitioners, if you're a practitioner, you're probably very close to what you do. If you're a developer or a founder, you've made something and you love it. And so you want to talk about it. And then when you go to start doing something like marketing, it becomes very academic, and you start to think through what are all the things that I have to include, and your brain immediately turns to technology, right? Because that's the closest thing you know. On the other hand, sometimes there are creative firms or there are marketing agencies or that technical person may outsource. And the creative agency is focusing on sparkle over substance. We're looking for that wow. We're looking for that amazing. And oftentimes it's not very connected to the experience of the buyer. And I like to liken it like this. I just did a presentation yesterday where we were talking superheroes, and I said it's kind of like the difference between Donatello and Michelangelo, right? Donatello, very technology focused. He was all about the tech. I mean, you can see he's got his little headphones there and everything. Michelangelo, loose cannon. This is maybe he's your social media person, just very much out there for the big impact. However, what we always learn from the movies and the cartoons is they don't really win until they work together. And then, of course, they have to bring along the other two brothers, but they were sold out at Target, so I didn't get a chance to purchase those. By the way, anytime you have an opportunity to write off one of these as a business expense, do it. So so again, focus. It's the difference between design and technologists, and oftentimes they're both right. They both have pieces of the conversation, but they're missing something. And what they're missing is sort of that foundations. They're missing that messaging basics. They're missing what really are we talking about? Are we doing everything? Or are we doing everything we need to? Or are we just focusing in one area? And so this is where, if we want to use the Ninja Turtles again, we bring in a master splinter. We bring in somebody who understands what those messaging foundations should be and helps them build on that. And you always remember, if you're a big fan of the Ninja Turtles, as I was, right? They always have to learn that lesson. They always have to get back to the basics. And so at this point, you're probably wondering one thing. Who is this weirdo and what business does he have talking about this? So I'll introduce myself for those of you who I haven't met. My name is Joel. I call myself a messaging therapist. My background is in theater, education, and video games. And then I accidentally became an IT nerd in the 90s and I did all this stuff. So I went from help desk to networking to security. Eventually, I found my way out and somebody at the federal government said, "You're a nerd, but you talk good. So we're going to put you in front of people." And that sort of set me off on this arc. Where I was learning how to communicate very complex subject matters, very complex stories, but to do it in a way that's compelling, that speaks to the non-technical person. And along that way, I had an experience at a startup that I want to talk about really briefly because it kind of sets the stage for some of the things that I'm going to talk about later. So first, a little bit of a story. So the gentleman who hired me at Homeland Security eventually left, finished his PhD, started a startup, and had a product. And we're having lunch one day, and he goes, "You know what, Joel? I'm having a real hard time just explaining what I do." And I said, "Well, what is the product?" He goes, "Well, it's based on my PhD thesis. It's a self-defending artificial intelligence multinodal network using the behavior of eusocial insects, ants." I said, "What does that mean?" He said, "Well, we're using ant swarm technology to predict where someone may be hacked next." And the technology was great. The algorithm was very good. We were a little bit early and ahead of the curve of the big data we needed to pull this feat off. But I decided to come on board as director of communications. Today, you would call that like the startup CMO, and we did everything. We went, life was very good. I think we had some pretty fun branding. We went to conferences. We leaned in on this ant concept really heavily. One of the challenges we had there was we first had to explain to people how ants worked before we could talk about how the product worked. And so there was a lot of friction there. So we learned, let's remove the ants from the story. And we presented at South by Southwest. We did many presentations. Things were actually pretty fun, but we weren't breaking through. We still were having a hard time explaining this technology because we were founder driven, very technical person. I was very nerdy myself. The developers were all talking about this is the way the algorithm works, and it's an ant colony optimization algorithm. And it wasn't until a breakthrough happened, and that was thanks to my son Liam. This is him here. This is him in his elementary school science project where he built a Tesla coil. Right. So again, very nerdy kid. Loves to play chess. He's been playing chess since he was 3 years old. I wanted to put a big picture in here to show you that he was all grown up. But one day he asked me, "Dad, what does your product do?" And so I've been trying to explain a PhD level algorithm to other PhDs and board executives. And it wasn't until I had to try to explain it to a very smart 8-year-old how it worked. I grabbed some cards because we were playing games all the time, and I laid out how I thought in my head the algorithm worked. And I knew I couldn't explain a lot of the technical details to him, right? So I did have to abstract it a little bit, but I wanted it to be accurate. And this was amazing. He and I started actually playing with the algorithm. We started playing cybersecurity risk scenarios, and he would lay one out, and I would tell him how we would defend against it. And I realized that this was an opportunity to actually talk to non-technical people to just to get them exposed to the concepts. So we made some cards. We did a couple test runs. It was very, very successful. Every place we would go, we would pull these cards out, and people would swarm around us, pun not intended. They were wondering, what is this? And we could put it in front of technologists, and we could put it in front of lay people. This is Kevin Mitnick, the world's most famous hacker. And regardless of your opinion of him, you have to, what is this? Explain it like I'm 5. Absolutely, that's true, 100%. I'm going to throw this up there. Near real life, explain it like I'm 5. Yeah, exactly. That's what it was like. But what we found out was we could put this in front of people, and regardless of what their exposure was to the technology, they had an entry point. And it was great. We took the cards on the road. We did several workshops with them. We took them to RSA. And we realized that what we were doing was just avoiding that content overwhelm. So one of the problems that we have very frequently when we are doing communications is we are missing a balance and an overwhelm. So I'm going to throw a poll up here. I'm going to pause the presentation for just a quick second. And I want to ask you, how many of you have ever had that blank stare moment, right? You've been doing that presentation. Maybe sometimes you're right in the middle of it. And you're like, this is not landing. People are not paying attention. I have to figure out I have to figure out what's going on here, right? So just a couple minutes here for that poll. We've got, yeah, oh boy, everybody. Yeah, just about everybody has had that. Some liars. See, I knew it. I knew somebody would change their vote. The answer is yes. Everybody has had that experience at some point. And the reason is it's content overwhelm. Even when you're communicating to technical people, even when you are speaking PhD to other PhDs, you do not have to speak on a PhD level. That's right, Tyler. I saw you post that. You're a liar, right? You shouldn't force someone to think very heavily. But the other reason is oftentimes we have a bias. And so we have to be aware as practitioners that we have our own biases, and we're bringing a lot of things to the conversation, things that are unsaid, things that we don't understand, or things that we know that people may not understand, but we understand them. Sorry. So if you think about the movie The Matrix, there's this phenomenal scene where Cypher is taking a look at the Matrix, and everything, all the stuff is dribbling down. Neo walks in and he goes, "What are you looking at there? Is that the Matrix?" And Cypher goes, "Well, you know what? The program is just, there's too much data for the interpreter program, so I like to look at it in raw code." But he says, "I don't even see the code anymore," right? He said, "I don't even see the code anymore," because he understands it. He can just look at something and interpret it. So we as technologists have to remember that our audiences often can't, right? So you shouldn't put a white paper in front of somebody and expect them to make a decision. You need to lead them along. And another reason for this, so I want to do an experiment. So I'm gonna give you guys, let's do a thought experiment. Let's pretend that we're in a ballroom, and I'm gonna let you just walk around. It's a large hotel, it's a ballroom, something like that. And I'm gonna walk you out, and I'm gonna ask you 2 questions. The first question is, how many chairs did you see? And there's no fair counting down in the picture, but you probably didn't pay attention to how many chairs there were. That was irrelevant information to you. However, if I then ask you a follow-up question, how many emergency exits did you notice? Your brain subconsciously probably scanned the room and had a pretty good idea that there were maybe two or three. And the reason for this is we still have a caveman brain. Our rational thinking brain, as amazing as it is relatively new to evolution. But we have these instincts, this self-preservation. So whether or not there are enough chairs in that room, how many chairs are in that room is really irrelevant to you. You have one butt. You can't sit down in every single chair. However, if there's a fire, your brain is looking at places to escape. And this is what happens when you're giving a presentation to your audience. You are giving them lots and lots and lots of information. And the more taxing it is, the more they have to think, the more they have to rationalize the information that's coming in, the more quickly that they're going to start dropping packets, right? They're going to start pitching things out. They're going to ignore things. Even those technical details that you think are really, really important, they may not. It may not be relevant to where they are right now. So the best thing you can do is presuppose and make a decision about what's the most important information to put in front of somebody. So that's why I call that respecting the caveman brain, because respecting the caveman brain, and speaking of chess, so my son Liam, I don't know whether he'll be a champion chess player someday, but champion grandmasters at chess have reportedly been able to burn like 5,000 calories in a day just sitting and thinking. So again, imagine that. A lot of the calorie burn that we have as humans is up in our brain, right? It's like 20% of the calorie burn is up here, and it's not that much of our body mass. So what that tells us is that the more we think, the harder it is to come to a decision, the less likely we are to follow that decision. So, and the inverse of that is the easier it is to make a decision, the more committed to it someone becomes, right? So that's why it's sometimes important. It's not to dumb down, but it's to meter out information and bring somebody along. So how do we do that? What do we need to do to make sure that our content is not overwhelming people? Well, we have to make very, very discrete decisions about what we are going to include. And so today, what we're going to talk about for the rest of our time, maybe for like 20, 25 minutes, I'm going to show you some things to keep in mind. I'm going to give you a model. I'm going to give you some exercises that you can do when you're thinking about your own messaging to try to make it a little bit less onerous on your audience. But the first thing I want to talk about is really the difference between clarity and focus. So a lot of people, when we start talking about messaging, they start immediately thinking about marketing. And they start thinking about the words I use, and they start thinking about the tagline and the tactics. That's all manifestation. So if there's only one thing that you take away from today, it's the difference between clarity and focus. So clarity is, if we look at the definition, the quality of being easy to see or hear, the sharpness of the image or sound, right? So this is something that is defined, it's intelligible, it's precise, it's very simple. This is like the thing that you want to say, but how you say it can be different. So that's the focus. That's if we take an image and we focus it upon something else, it will change depending on what that image is. So depending on what I want to say, I may change that depending on who I'm speaking to. But if you don't understand first what you want to say, you will not be able to then understand how you need to say it, right? So a lot of people immediately start thinking about the audience, and they're not necessarily first thinking about what they want to say. So this is very, very important to understand, because what we're going to be talking about is that clarity of message, not necessarily the messaging itself. So what I want to just first do is talk about philosophy. A lot of people didn't think they were going to come here and get a presentation about philosophy. But borrowing a little bit from Aristotle, he said there were three main objectives or arguments that you could make. There's emotion, there's logic, and there's credibility. Most people who are in tech or B2B, especially cybersecurity, are locked really tightly in that logic, right? You're going to buy my cloud-based IAM solution because you need a cloud-based IAM solution. But if that's all you're talking about, you haven't warmed somebody up. You haven't triggered that lizard brain, that caveman emotion brain, and they're going to start dropping those packets when you start to talk logic. And you certainly haven't developed any credibility, right? So emotion is that sort of that heart, that feel that, whoa, this is interesting, I want to learn more. Logic is, okay, I'm beginning to understand what you're about. And credibility, it's kind of weird. It's a gut feeling, right? So I would have put a picture of a small intestine down there, but that would have been weird. So I used a hamburger. But it is also, it's a feeling, but it's a feeling that's based on information. And it's not something that you can develop immediately. It's something that you have to cultivate, which means you also have to have a relationship with somebody. So again, it is attention and engagement. That's what we get from emotion. Very important today's age where we have social media and people have to make a decision lightning quick. Then you've got that logic. This is where I'm sharing information with you. I'm developing a relationship. There's learning. And then credibility is what it takes to make someone make a decision, to make someone buy that product, to make someone do or not do that thing that you recommend from your threat brief, right? This is trust and conversion. So again, this is Aristotle. It's pathos, logos, and ethos. If you're into the original Greek. So what do we do with this then? Like, how do we do that? So we can understand that we need to balance a message, but there are many also many different types of messages that are available to us. And so what I'm going to build from the bottom up here is something you'll probably recognize as Maslow's hierarchy of needs. But this is a hierarchy of messaging needs. So right down here at the bottom, we have these high density, low emotion technical details. Again, where most organizations are stuck, right? But if that's all you're communicating about, that's table stakes. You probably have 3, 4, 5 different competitors, maybe a dozen competitors. And if you're all saying the same thing, it's hard for someone to pick you out of the crowd and go with your solution or your offer. So we need to start moving away from the high density. We need to start putting some emotion in, and immediately people go to a proof point. And a proof point would be something like a metric, right? But there are many other different types of proof points, which I'll talk about a little bit later. I'm going to gloss over mantras because we're going to talk about that in a little bit of a bit, but that's kind of like a language technique that we need to learn. But then we start getting into the marketing. We start really getting into the typical marketing stack: value proposition statements, stories, and big ideas. And so what we have here is a pyramid where, again, there's probably many different types of constituencies within your organization. They're all talking about these things at different levels. But if you're not collecting them together and you're not putting them in one place where everybody has access to them and understands how they work together, it's a real missed opportunity, because you may be speaking to someone who needs to hear some value or some story points, and if you're hitting them really hard with technical details, they may not be they may not pay attention. So what I want to do first is take a quick step back, and I want to throw up a real quick poll, and I want to ask you, where do you think, and I'm going to reopen this poll. Where do you feel that you do most of your communicating today? So if you look at the pyramid, it is kind of structured across that emotion, logic, and credibility. There's a rough alignment to there, but not everything is as clear cut, right? Ideas aren't all emotional, and proof points aren't all logical. Technical details, pretty logical, but there are some that lead to credibility. So I'm curious here, as the votes come in. Yeah, logic. Everybody falls into logic, and that's okay. That's okay. Oh, we got a credibility here. That's good. I love that. Actually, that's really, really good. If you can, well, I don't want to out you. You don't have to drop in a chat which one you were, but yeah, that's phenomenal. So not a lot of people doing emotion, but that's okay, because today we're going to talk about from this pyramid model, how do we get to those emotional messaging points? And what I'm going to do is I'll basically just touch on one more reason why we need to do this. Your questioners or your receivers are asking these questions that align with these. It's probably subconsciously. But for example, what is this trying to make me feel? The story. How is this trying to connect with my experience? Do these people have an empathy with me? Which of my values is this trying to hook into? What key phrases or triggers are being leveraged? Now, again, we're going to go into mantras in a little bit. That's a very fun conversation. Where's the third-party proof or validation? That's usually for your very technical person ask that question. But then just like, where are the bare facts? Like, what is just like where are we technically? And what I'll share with you a little bit later is you're probably not thinking about the same technical bare facts that your audience is, right? So you need to ask some more questions of yourself. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pause really briefly because I have an opportunity for you guys. I have probably another 15 or so slides that we could kind of go through, and we could do all of these slides if we really wanted to. But I did want to make this an interactive thing. So I'm gonna ask you: do we want to do this the fun way, or do we want to do this the boring way? So for the interactivity. I'm going to leave it up to you because again, some of you very logical. You may want to do the boring way, but I'm going to give it a chance for everybody to get their votes in. Nobody's voting for the boring way. Oh, that's so disappointing. All right, I'll take that off there. Yeah, that's what I was hoping you were going to say. So a lot of people are probably asking, how do we do this? How do we build out all these messages? We have all these people in our organization. How do we get those messages attention? Yes, that's right. It's a perfect play on the emotions. It absolutely is. I mean, I do kind of know what I'm doing here. So what we're going to do is I want to share something with you. This is something that some of you may have seen, but what I have done is I've taken all of my 25 or so years in communications. I'm going to put my picture down here. There we go. And I have put together a card deck that I use in my workshops with my clients to make this fun, to really engage people. So again, what we have is we have a card deck. We have our reminders, again, about our emotion, our logic, and credibility. And can everybody in the chat tell me if this is backwards or if y'all can read this? Because I don't know if my camera is swapping it. It's swapped for me. So if I can just get I can read it in the chat. That would be awesome. So, but I'm going to continue no matter what. You'll just have to pretend. It's perfect. All right, awesome. Just a trick of the technology. Again, technology. So emotion, logic, and credibility. Then we have our messaging framework. And quite often what I find is I'll be working with a technical founder and they'll say, you know what, I don't really care about the technology. I don't really care about the big ideas. I don't really care about the messages. I'm just going to let somebody in marketing do all that marketing stuff, right? Because I'm technical. I'm a technical communicator. I'm a technical founder, and I cannot be taught. And I'll say, well, that's really interesting. What is something that you would change about your industry? And almost immediately their eyes light up and they're like, hey, you know what? Do you know what I would do? Blah, 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 blah. Because we have triggered an emotion with that prompt, right? We have gotten something out of them. And so I'll say, that's awesome. Let's write that down. Whom or for what do you advocate? Right? This is very credibility building because if we're able to speak to our audience and say, look, I do this for people like you. I do this because because I love to work for small businesses because blah, blah, blah. And if you're able to point that type of message towards them, it shows a lot of credibility. It goes a long way towards building that out. Here's another one. What is an opportunity that you see that others don't? Right? And immediately it's a little bit of a logic, but there is some emotion there. So what we've done here is I've taken a lot of prompts. There's about 280 prompts total in the system that I've got. But we play a game. We actually try to make it fun. So I want to try to, at least with the medium that we have here today, I want to try to play a game with you guys and step through this messaging stack, go through these prompts, and for you guys to just throw in the chat some of the answers to these prompts, these big ideas, things like that. Okay, so and as we go along, I'm going to introduce what each of these levels are. And if you start to get out of bounds, if you start to do something, you start to get a little too nerdy, I'll have to pull out my my so what cards. So I'll save those for later. So I'd like you all to just drop in the chat just really, really quickly. Let's start right here. What is something you would change about your industry? So if you can put in the chat what your industry is and something that you want to do differently or that you do differently, drop it in the chat. And what we're looking for again are those big ideas. These are why we are different, why we have chosen to do something completely differently. Or this could be the thing that nobody else is talking about. I have another card a little bit later on, which is like the big secret. What are those things in the industry that nobody's talking about? You may also put in here, what gaps are you seeing in the marketplace? So this is another really good one. This one is, again, very emotional. So let's see, Elliot, yeah, less buzzwords, more context based on actual customer prospect need. And you're in the cybersecurity space, yeah. So yeah, we're cyber without the buzzwords. We're not going to over jargon you. I mean, that's actually perfect for the card that I have, which is like the so what card. Okay, I love that. Anybody else? How about this is a great one. What is the inspiration to action in your industry? Why do you and your audience get up in the morning? Right? Like, what is that thing that makes people just get really excited? I've done a lot of work in the government, and it's always our mission is your mission. We work for the mission. And it's like, that's not as compelling as you think it may be, right? But if we can find what is that call, what is that thing that makes people want to wake up in the morning and do their thing, right? Tyler, solving complex problems, right? We solve complex problems. Now, I'm going to pull out one of my Uno reverse cards on you, Tyler. This is a focus card. These are, as a consultant, these are like the consultant in a box. So it's nothing personal, Tyler, but so what? Dig deeper. Can you get to the heart of the matter there for me, Tyler? So what? I want to solve complex problems because, right? And so what we're identifying here is maybe some language that we're just used to. This is kind of a little bit of a trope. Maybe it's a little bit of a cliche. We make the complex simple, right? We do X so you can focus on Y. There's a lot of these things in the marketplace that we jump to instinctively because we see them in the marketplace, and we want to own those as our big idea. But as we talked about with the difference between clarity and focus, right? What is the thing you want? Yeah, there we go. Because I want to learn and create. I love this. I'm gonna pop that up there for everybody, right? So why are we solving complex problems, Tyler? Because I want to learn and create. I want to do big, creative, awesome, amazing things. And I don't want complexity to stand in the way, right? So what I'm doing here is I'm sort of prompting and coaching, and then helping you say, you don't want to say those words because everybody else is saying it. But if that thought is true, if the clarity and the thing you want to say is true to you, we can find a better way of saying it. So awesome, Tyler. Thanks for that. So again, the way this works in the workshop is we go through several of these cards. It's not all of them, but we write our answers down either on the backs of cards or on sticky notes. I do this with a Notion board or a Miro board, right? We can do this remotely. There's lots of different ways to do it. But the reason this works so well is because, especially when you're working in a team. So again, we were talking earlier about having the full organization represented. When I do my workshops, even if I'm doing technical communications, I want to have sales, marketing, development. I want to have leadership. I want to have everybody there representing, because again, everybody contributes a different thing to the stack. But what I don't want this to turn into is a negotiation or a free-for-all, or the situation where the person with the biggest mouth or who writes the biggest check is the only person that listens. So what's great about this model and doing this approach is everybody's writing their stuff down. They're writing their stuff down independently at first. We're getting everything out of everybody's head. So those people who are quiet, who don't often share, they're able to contribute. And that person that just won't shut the hell up, they're writing their stuff down too, right? So we're not dominating. That's right. Diverse opinions are always an added bonus. Absolutely. And we're going to talk a little bit later about how do we weed out diverse opinions or conflict or things like that. So let's do another card here. I love this one. This is a story card. Stories are how we, again, relate and how we show empathy to our audience. Right. So a lot of people get stuck up on this whole idea of the hero story. And I need to write a story about my audience and make them the hero. Yes, that's true. It's very valuable. But it's almost even more important to have these little vignettes and these little stories about your audience, about their experience, and about your experience, and connecting those together. So I love this one. This is tension. This is, where do you feel the tension between your consumers and their stakeholders? So again, you may be selling a technical solution, but it's solving a problem that somebody has in their life, right? It's solving the tension they may have between their CFO. Look, Chief Information Officer, Security Officer, I recognize that you've got a big problem justifying your security spend. So what if I could make that conversation with your CFO so much more valuable, right? So much easier. It's not a technical thing that you're talking about. You're actually acknowledging their lived experience, and then you're sort of inserting yourself, or you're supporting and validating them through your story. So again, where do you feel the tension between your consumers and their stakeholders? That's a great one. This is another one. If you did not exist, what would people be doing instead to solve the same problem? So a lot of people think about their competition, but you know what? The biggest competition out there is doing nothing, or ignoring the problem, or trying to do a homegrown solution. And those are things that you can't do opposition research on. You can't look at do nothing on the website and understand what their value propositions are, right? So again, you've got to put yourself in their place, and that is giving a little bit of an emotion, because we are in the story level of the stack, but it's logic. It shows that you have thought through this. So I'll prompt you for, here's a good one. I love this one. So this is the gossip. This is, what do you hope people are saying about you when you're not around, but are you delivering on that? So let's see, biggest competition is inertia. Yeah, absolutely. That's exactly right. So what do you hope people say about you when you're not around? So if it's not, it's kind of the shadow side of a testimonial, right? These are testimonials you don't have yet, but you'd like to have them. So can you start writing, can you start creating the air cover and doing the groundwork to start building those stories out in the marketplace? Another really good one here is the stumble. So how did you stumble on your breakthrough, and what did you try before? Because again, as technologists and practitioners, we tend to fall into this hero mentality where everything that I do is perfect, and what I built always works, but it never does. So if you can share where you've stumbled, that also helps your audience to say, yeah, I've tried that same thing too, right? So I'm going to zip through another couple of these because I do want to talk about each of the levels. Values are not the value like your mission, vision, value that you have on your homepage. Values are those things that your audience and your customers are getting out of your relationship with them, and those can be tangible. They can be intangible. They can also be, I love this one, this is a superpower. So the superpower is a technique that you can use where you put a proper noun, capital letters, on the thing that you deliver for your customer, right? You almost custom brand it. You do have to get away from being too custom brandy. But if I was a detergent company and I said, you know what? 9 out of 10 people have a stinky sock problem, and they're not even aware of it. And the stinky sock problem gets in the way of many relationships. And have you ever considered that your teenager may be introducing a stinky sock problem to your house? And pretty soon, those people who had no idea that they had a stinky sock problem, capital S, capital S, capital P, are now thinking in the back of their head, I wonder if I have a stinky sock problem. Because what you've done is you have identified, oh no, I'm sorry, that's the villain card. The superpower would be the opposite of that. The superpower is the super empowerment. So if you can give a name to the thing that you deliver, I think villain is over here in story. You're able to own that story. You're able to own that value. Nobody else can deliver that thing that you deliver, right? So it's not just a tangible technical thing. A mantra, I said I would talk about this. The mantras are things that are a part of your culture and a part of your audience, their culture, and you're relating to. So it's similar to story, but it's like little keywords and little tips and little tricks. So one of mine is, I'm a nerd that talks good. So those of you who know me, there I am right there, nerd that talks good. If you are in the community, if you exist there, they should know it. right? So another one of mine is get noticed, get remembered, and get details, or get results, right? Because what I want you to do is I want you to pay attention to the language. And when you start hearing language that you recognize, you cue in and you pay attention. So, but the way we do that is by, what phrase do you find repeating often? That's very good. Are you saying something within your team over and over and over again? But what phrase are you often hearing from your customers? And that takes some logic. It takes some thinking. I love this one. What headlines pop into your mind when you talk about your solution or your company? And this is something that you can all do when you get home. You probably are home, but when we're done, you can do this. The zeitgeist. Search your industry or category. What are the most common words and phrases used on the very first page of search? Now, generative AI SEO may be screwing that with that a little bit, but this is going to tell you what your audience, how they talk, because you have to talk like your audience talks. And oftentimes, technical people, we're a very insular community, and sometimes we're not always talking that way. Then there are the proof points, and I kind of touched on this a little bit earlier when I said there are multiple types, so I'm not going to belabor this too long. But we always go right to metrics. That's logical, but it can start developing credibility. So now that we're closer to the bottom of the pyramid, we're going to start to get some real credibility builders. Stories and mantras do build credibility, but it's more like that emotional empathy. But here, so what metrics can you point to with proof? And then what outcomes or what successes can you point to? No numbers, right? So again, it's that quantitative and qualitative. People need to see both. If you're just throwing a whole bunch of numbers in front of somebody, those are numbers that their brain has to interpret. They're numbers that they have to hold in their brain, and too many will overwhelm them. So if you can pepper some hard metrics and some qualitative things, some of those stories, again, this is a proof point by way of kind of like a story, that's going to go a long way. But then, this one I talked about, testify. Talking about yourself is weird. What can you get someone else to say about you? So after this session, you're going to get an email from me with some links and some offers and a little place to put your thoughts, a comment form. I'd love to hear what you think. So again, there's many different types of proof points that you need to have, and you need to have them all available. You need to have them in a place where your team can grab them and use them in their communications. And then the last is the technicals. And again, you may be thinking, I know all the technical details. I need all of these, right? I know what it does. I know how it works. I know how much it costs, right? But you may not be asking the same questions that technical buyer is asking. And you want to have everything in the same place for your team. So it might be like, hey, can we talk about what is open in your solution and what's closed? What can I tinker with and what can I get access to? What can I customize? Not a lot of people think about that, especially early companies, because they're on that MVP, and it's really dangerous to let a customer get in there and tinker with it. So you need to be open with them about that. Or how about, how does your speed or solution bring efficiency, speed, or scale? How does your solution provide a competitive advantage to the business? So a lot of people, again, saying my solution does a thing, but they don't often say, and it impacts you in this way, right? So there are many, 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 many questions from a technical standpoint that you may not be thinking of, but working with a consultant or working with a bunch of prompts like this are going to give you those questions you need to think about. And I have an expansion pack for the card deck, which is specifically designed for cybersecurity companies, and it's almost all technicals, right? So these are things that the technical industry or the cybersecurity industry is all using, but as a founder or a technical practitioner, you just might be too close to ask those questions for yourself. So you may now be asking, I think we need to do a little bit of a breather. So what I want to do is I want to ask you, I need to stop this poll. I still have this poll going. I want to ask you, assuming that you have some of these answers, assuming that you have these things in place, are you using in your organization any type of a messaging system, right? So what do you do? And a lot of people ask me this. So I've got all these inputs, and I've answered all these cards, and I've done all these exercises. I've got briefs, and I've got PDFs and things like that of my messaging. But are you using a messaging system? Awesome. We do have a messaging system. That's cool. I'd love to hear in the chat whether that's a technical messaging system, or what the platform is and who's using it. So again, going back to that, who is contributing, well, Elliot, I know you do because we've had this conversation. You threw the poll off, man. So, you have a lot of people who need to do the communicating, and they need to do the messaging in your organization, and they may not have access all the time. So yeah, we had 75 yeses and 25 nos. So how do we get all this stuff out of our head, right? It's not enough just to put together a PowerPoint, or to put together a style guide or something like that. Sorry, Elliot. We've got to do something with all this ideas and all these things that are flying around. And so what I like to advocate for is then taking everything and doing some analysis against it. So what I like to do in my workshops is collect all the input. So we've pulled everything together. We've done the poll with a large bunch of the team. We get everything in one place. So it can be a workshop, or it can be a poll. It really doesn't matter. The cards are a really fun way to do it. We pull everything together, and then we start to cluster. We start to look at like versus like. Here we go. So we want to cluster similar thoughts together. So this is an example of a virtual board that I did with the Mozilla Foundation. We were trying to do some communications about misinformation. And what we did was we pulled everything in virtually, and then we started to look at commonalities. So we started to look at those themes. We started to look at, is there anything here hidden that we haven't, that we're not using in our messaging and marketing? So when I'm working with a company, I'll often have 8 to 10 people in a room, and when we start to do this clustering, we start to feel that there really are like 5 or 6 big ideas, and there are like 3 or 4 values. Again, it's the difference between clarity and focus. They may be using different words for them, but the thought behind what they want to say is the same. So I'll often ask them, I'll be like, hey, have you guys ever used this in any of your marketing? And 9 times out of 10, they're like, we had no idea, we were thinking the same thing. That's a gold nugget if you can identify that. So by clustering, by pulling everything together and looking at commonalities, you're able to separate yourself from that negotiation that we talked about earlier, and you're then able to get like everything out of your heads and onto the table and start looking at it. But what happens if you have a disagreement? What happens if there's discord? Sometimes you've got co-founders who we find out aren't really thinking along the same lines. Well, what we do in that case is we hold their feet to the fire. We have to make some decisions, right? So you have to actually take and you have to cull. You've got to make some decisions about what's in and what's out, because the worst thing you can do as an organization is go out on multiple fronts with multiple people saying multiple different things, right? So we have to hold people's feet to the fire, and we have to say, look, you've got to make a decision. Are you an X or are you a Y? Or is there a way these things can coexist with each other? And as long as we're aware of them, right, we can then have options. So, and then what we do after this is we take everything out and we coordinate it into a system. So what I do with my clients when I'm done working with them is I deliver either a Notion board, which is a fully functional messaging system, or we put it into Excel. I don't prefer Excel because it's not as dynamic, but what you're able to do with the messaging system is then everybody has access to it. So the marketing uses it for marketing, sales uses it for sales. Dev can even look at it and say, what are we communicating on the outside so that we know what we need to develop towards? And done right, it becomes a living, breathing document, and you're actually able to like take the feedback in. So sales comes in and says, we tried this messaging at this one conference with this audience, and it worked so much better than the way we used to say it. Great. But let's capture that and let's make sure that we're not straying and we're not confusing the audience, right? So the idea here is to put everything in a system that's flexible so that we're able to use it. So that is the soup to nuts, top to bottom. It's an awful lot. I thank you guys for hanging with me. but I want to give you an opportunity to try this out for yourself and to get started. So what I'm going to do today is I'm putting some links up, and actually I'm going to drop one in the chat myself. If you would like to try some of these prompts, I have a form that you can use. It's a Google form. If you go to messagespecs.com/deck sample, it's just a form that you can fill out, and just it takes you through a couple of these prompts. You can do it with your team, or if you actually want to get your hands on the message deck yourself, you can use this code blank check for 25% off of all the message deck. It's physical. I've got digital versions if you want to use it. This is great if you just want to do some. Let me do use code. Should have copied this before. Use code blank check, and you'll get 25% off of that. But if you're like, yeah, this is great. There's no way, one, I could get my team on board with this. This is a little woo-woo. If you're seeing that there might be some obstacles to doing this yourself, what I would invite you to is to just have a conversation. Let's talk about your messaging. Let's understand a little bit about what you're dealing with, what your challenges are. So I'm also offering a 60-minute message therapy session only for the people that joined me tonight, because I usually don't put myself out there and give an hour away. Usually I try to keep that a little bit tight, but since you guys took the initiative and joined me tonight, I'm happy to put myself out there and to be available to you. So let me pull up this note here. If you book at this Calendly link, which I do not make public, so keep it to yourself, it's a 1 hour long message therapy session where what we'll do is we can talk about some of the challenges that you have. I'm happy to take a look at any of your messaging and the stuff that you do, and just give you again, that gut feel about where the balances are. I'm happy to talk about a next step plan for growth for you, whether that's doing a workshop for your team, doing consulting. I also just do coaching. And then I also have an amazing network of freelancers and agencies and people that I work with who could assemble your marketing dream team. So if you're like, this is great, who's going to do the execution? We've got you covered on that as well. So again, we've got about another 9 minutes. I'm happy to open up to the chat if anybody wants to ask any questions. But that's what I wanted to share with you. I really wanted to share the messaging platform and the framework, right? Those 6 different messaging elements and those 3 different types of objectives, because in my experience, those are very simple things to learn, but they take a little while to digest. But once you've got those, even the most technical communicator can go from getting that blank stare moment to getting those blank checks, to getting people to engage. So again, thank you so very, very much. If you have any questions in the poll, or if you have any questions in the chat, I don't think I have any more polls to fire at you. But again, I thank you guys so much. Elliot, my team is going to love this when I unleash it. I'm excited. Yeah, I'm excited to help. Anything that I can do, that is what I'm all about. So I'm all about giving back. Again, I am Joel. I am the nerd that talks good, and I'm here to help you talk gooder. All right, Elliot's got a question. I got a fun scenario. Say you've got a technical product, but the economic buyer doesn't necessarily need to be technical. I'm going to put this up here. Do you lead with a technical message since they're a heavy influencer, or do you appeal to the one with the money? This is a good one. Let's see. I think we probably need you want to get the buy-in from that technical buyer, but what you also want to do is you want to make sure that you're delivering and giving them the value that they can take to that economic buyer. So I think your best bet is to make a champion of that technical buyer. And, this might take a little bit of coaching. You might have to do a little bit of the message therapy that we just did and be like, look, I understand that you want this tool and that you've got. So again, this is that card that I've already covered up here, that sell-through card on that tension. You understand that you've got to make this business case to this technical buyer, or sorry, to the economic buyer, but I have to figure out a way to help you do that easily. And if I can make it easy for you to explain to your CFO why you should buy my product, would that be a win situation? Do you see how going through that phase is going to get you to where we need to get, right? So yeah, that's a great question. But I think it depends on who you made first contact with, who you're trying to turn into that advocate and that friend, who you're trying to get to love you, right? Let's see, anything else? Yeah, secondary resources. So Elliot's follow up on that is I dig secondary resources and education once your champion's brought in. That's right. You've got to build a champion, and it takes love. You got to make somebody love you for that champion, right? So let's see. We got any trending? Let's see. One of those chat messages in there. Awesome. So again, I really want to thank you guys. My door is always open to have these chats. This is what I live for, is helping technical communicators talk good, right? My liberal arts people and my AP English teacher would be like, oh no, you need to talk well. You don't need to talk well. You just need to talk good enough. So I will open it up for like 5 more minutes for any more questions. But I will release you and cut you loose. Thank you for spending time with me. This has been a blast. You will be getting an email with me with some of these links and as a thank you. So awesome. We'll just leave it open for a few more minutes. I'm happy to chat, but we can just, I don't really know how to end this thing. I don't want to go. Don't make me go. All right, you guys. Thanks, Tyler. Thanks, Elliot. Thanks, Yaroslav. Everybody. See ya.